Hello, my name is Kay Meyer. I'm a reader and writer of all things creepy, and today I wanted to share what I've been reading for the Trans Rights Readathon. So this readathon started March 17th and goes through the 31st, which is International Trans Visibility Day. The Trans Rights Readathon is a call to action to book lovers everywhere, all ages and all reading levels, to uplift trans voices by reading authors and characters who are trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming, and any other gender-expansive identity that includes culturally specific ones like Two-Spirit or Indigiqueer, and basically a whole bunch of other ones from around the world that existed before colonization that don't really fit the Western definition. Two things before we get to the books that I've been reading. First is I highly suggest looking at the Trans Rights Readathon's website. I have it linked below. They are compiling a master list of trans authors and books, which is pretty great. If you would like to support trans voices monetarily, other than books, they have some suggestions of where to donate based on state, as they really encourage looking locally. There is also a Storygraph challenge already lined up. One of the things I really like about Storygraph challenges is if they have specific prompts set up for that challenge, you can add what books you read, and it creates this whole mini database of books that everybody's reading for those categories, and you can find some really good recommendations. So the people that created this readathon made a fun little bingo graphic where you can check off books as you read them if they fit the prompts. Now, you don't have to read a book for each of the prompts individually. You can double up on them, but I would suggest looking at least putting recommendations from each of these categories on your TBR so you'll get to them when you can. Challenges like these, I think, are more about reading intentionally and doing what you can. I expanded this readathon to all of March because I knew there was no way I was going to get to read 9 books in like 2 weeks. As it is, I've only read 5 of these. And right now for me, it's March 20th, and I still have a couple more books to go. And I don't want to just, restrict reading trans authors to this readathon, because that would be weird. All right, I have my handy dandy list of the prompts, so I will rattle these off. Just know all these prompts count for the author and or the characters. So, number 1, a book with a trans mask or trans man representation. Bonus points if it's by a POC author. Number 2, read a book by a trans femme or trans woman. Bonus points for this one if there are multiple trans plus or non-binary characters. Number 3, read a book with non-binary or gender expansive representation. Bonus points if it also has diverse bodies represented. Number 4, intersectional trans representation, plus the author or character has to have an additional representation that is outside your own experience. For prompt number 5, this is the only prompt where the author must have this identity, so it's an own voices book. And that is somebody who is Two-Spirit, Indigiqueer, or an indigenous gender identity that is expansive outside of Western ideas of that. Number 6, this must be a trans book that features trans joy, love, and or resistance. There's a lot of possibilities with this one. Number 7, a book that features trans youth and or is about imagining trans futures, which this is very important right now, especially in America where I am. And my state and neighboring states are severely restricting the things that trans people can do, which is terrible. Moving on, prompt 8, read a book by a trans elder or a trans history book. And the last prompt you can check off if you read a book that I recommend today, and that prompt is a book rec from a friend, librarian, or bookseller. I'm not a bookseller. I'm not a librarian, but I can be your little internet recommendation friend. All right, moving on to what I've been reading. So the first book I read is Ollie in Between by Jess Callans. This is the one and only middle grade book I read for this readathon. Now, I'm still reading 2 of the books I'm going to talk about at the end, but just know, so far, this is the only one that has made me cry, and this book made me cry a lot. In a good way, though. Like, I just connected to this character so much, and I really wasn't expecting to. And I really loved following along Ollie's journey to, in the end, discovering and accepting that they are non-binary. This book has so many layers, and it's the kind of book that I wish I had been able to read when I was this age. So Ollie in Between is about a 12-year-old who goes by Ollie, who is trying to figure out kind of everything about their life. They're 12, so they got a lot of annoying stuff to deal with puberty and people in middle school. Ugh, gross. I remember living through that, where Ollie really just wants a space and time to figure it out for themselves. This book is about friendship, the ones that you outgrow, and the friends that support who you're becoming. One of the things I really enjoyed about this book is the found family of the new friends that Ollie makes and their queer book club at school. I would say is a good representation of trans joy and resistance. And multiple of the characters in this friend group are queer, and it's nice that Ollie isn't like the only one in their school or anything like that. And these friends are in 8th grade while Ollie is still in 7th. So in that way, this friend group kind of reminded me of a more middle grade version of The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which I also love. One thing I wanted to mention from the author acknowledgements is that he wrote this book kind of like in response to Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which that is a book that I read when I was in middle school. And back then, it felt very outdated, especially what they use as period products. And it makes a lot of sense to me that he wrote this book in response to that one that's all about a girl going through puberty and growing up and having her first crush and all that stuff. I don't know, it's been a long time since I read it. There's a lot of times Ollie wishes they could put puberty on hold, and they really just want to understand the reason why all the adults and their peers are performing gender in specific ways and what it all means. And the word autistic is never like clearly said to describe Ollie in this book, and it's from their point of view. But there are so many things that I thought were clues and pretty clear. One of the first things I got out from the first chapter of this book is that this main character really likes shrimp. They have a lot of fun shrimp facts. And they know a lot of just about a lot of different bugs and animals and crustaceans in general. So Ollie has a special interest, but that alone doesn't mean that they're autistic. This could just be a quirky shrimp kid, I guess. The second thing that got me was Ollie uses other people's expressions to convey their own feelings. So there's a part where they're disgusted, so they think of how their older sister, what her face looks like when she's disgusted. So they make that face. They also don't really understand emojis, and just even a little bit into the book, there's been a couple times where they haven't understood facial expressions or how to form their own face to express what they think other people want them to be expressing and feeling. But Ollie doesn't feel that way anyway, so there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And the third thing is that there was some paperwork that Ollie's mom had from a psychologist about Ollie, but Ollie threw the paperwork away. Ollie's mom is not there anymore. She passed away a few years ago when Ollie was in 4th grade, and Ollie didn't want their dad to be burdened with more things. But Ollie doesn't know what was in the paperwork. I'm guessing that could have been an autism assessment or something neurodivergent related in general, at least. Wanting to know the definition of that and the reason why people believe that, and why can't anyone just answer the question about what it means to be a woman and what it means to grow up. And every time Ollie is asking these questions, people are coming up with the randomest answers that don't really answer the question at all, and they end up just rambling about how they don't know the answers. And Ollie just wants a clear-cut definition, where to me it was just pretty obvious that that is an autistic way of thinking about that. And Ollie has to learn to kind of find their way in the in-between of a lot of things. Their gender expression or lack of, their racial identity as a mixed person who is white and Persian, but only knows the white side of their family, and the white side of their family isn't that interested in sharing Persian culture with Ollie. I wanted to read a short excerpt from this as well that I think just very clearly demonstrates why a book like Ollie in Between is really important in 2026. Unfortunately, especially in America and with all the craziness we got going on and horrible things happening, especially specifically to trans people and non-binary people. So yeah, I'm just gonna read it. Did you know that some people think just putting books with queer characters into schools will make kids queer? If being a boy or a girl is so built into us at birth, if it's not something we learn from everyone around us, then what are a few books going to do to change that? I don't think you can make anyone into anything unless the pieces were already there to start with. I guess the point is that it's pretty messed up that I consider myself lucky to be walking into Miss Atanto's room after school and read queer books with the other queer kids. There, I said it. Other. One last thing that I really appreciated from this book is that in the end, Ollie's dad agrees to take them to a therapist and also go to counseling himself and join a support group for parents of queer teens. And I think both of those things can be enormously helpful and just really important. The next book I read is What Stalks the Deep by T. Kingfisher. This is the third in her Sworn Soldier series. And I have them all! The first is What Moves the Dead. This whole series started as a Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher retelling with like a queer twist, but it's not literary in a stuffy sense. Like, I find these very funny. The second book is What Feasts at Night. In this one, our main character, Alex Easton, they go back home to their families, like cottage in the woods, and face a monster of their own. And in this third one, What Stalks the Deep, Alex goes to America and finds even more horrors here. So these books fall into the non-binary or gender-expansive category because the main character is a third gender that is unique to this fiction world that they're from. And basically, the people in Galatia, they use a lot of different pronouns for all sorts of things that we don't have in English. They have a specific pronoun just for God, and one just for rocks, which I honestly, as a rock person, a crystal girly, I really love that. So instead of like he, him, or they, them, Alex goes by ka or con. Con as in the plural or possessive. And the use of ka and con as pronouns are used exclusively for the sworn soldiers of Galatia. And we don't get as much of these pronouns in this book just because since they're all in America, Alex chooses to go by he, him just for a little bit of safety, but mostly brevity. They don't want to be explaining the whole history of Galatia and their military system to these random people on a boat also going to America who just can't stop talking about Guam for some reason that I didn't get that reference. But it was pretty funny because Alex gets really annoyed. The first one was something weird with a house and the people in it. And the second one has to do with a creature coming in the night and kind of like stealing your soul. The horror in this third one is something's wrong in this cave. There's something weird. But since in Galatia they have another whole set of pronouns for rocks, we get some more rock pronoun usage in this, which is just fun and different. There is also some bonus. I'm making this face because I don't know if I want to say like monster or human or animal because it's really a little bit of all three. But there is representation of another, you could say, gender expansive character, who could present however they want because they can mimic who they see, but they choose to present as masculine. So I just wanted to mention that as a little maybe bonus character that also fits this gender expansive representation. Anyway, I thought this was a really good addition to the series. Now that we have two that are original stories, I like this one even more than the second one. And I really liked how it all tied together, especially with the different like American kind of the folk horror aspects of it, and some stuff that I had never heard of before that I was like, oh, that's what that is. Okay. There was also a really awesome scene where a character is in a part of the cave where there is very flammable gas, where they reach their hand through what is basically goop, and they flick open their lighter, and then everything else around them just explodes. And that was really, really cool. And just a really awesome, like, visual of that explosion. Okay, now my third book is the first in another zombie series that I really need to read the rest of. How We End by L.M. Juniper was amazing. 5 billion stars. I listened to the audiobook, and the two different narrators were unbelievable. I also, as an American, cannot be a good judge of British accents, and this takes place in England, so I can't say how accurate that is, but to my untrained American ears, it sounded good. So we can add How We End to the growing subcategory of zombie apocalypses caused by fungus and mushroom outbreaks. Honestly, I think this is an amazing addition to the zombie kind of lore, because there's only so many things that can drive you crazy enough to eat people, right? But bring in a fungus that kind of also works as a virus that takes you over and starts turning you into different things. This book unlocked a new zombie-related fear in me. What if, when the zombie apocalypse starts, I'm underground in a subway and none of the train cars are moving, and there are people in the subway train that are slowly turning into a zombie, but you don't know it yet. I don't know it yet. Nobody does. They just think, oh, that dude's having a bloody nose, and that girl's going through it. She looks rough. And then you have to escape because they're going to flood the entire subway system to just get rid of the infected and everybody else. So that's where the main character Jake starts at the beginning of this book. Jake is our trans man representation. His family is also Korean. And while this ultimately doesn't play a life or death stakes in the zombie apocalypse, there are really important ways that the author integrates that into the story. First of all, Jake's dad is a scientist for the government, so we can see where that's going, especially in a book about zombies. And Jake hasn't talked to his dad in a few years, since he has transitioned, because his dad doesn't respect that. However, Jake gets a call from his dad when nobody else in the subway system has service, and his dad warns him to get out of there as fast as he can, and to come find his mom and his little brother and go to this safe area, which I won't spoil if he gets there or not. There is a second main point of view character named Liv. She basically just wakes up in her car after a night at the bar, and people are knocking on her door trying to be let in because the government is out just quarantining people. And these people are like, let us into your truck. We need to get out of here as fast as possible. And she's like, who the hell are you? And then she sees military people and she's like, okay, hop in, we're leaving. I like her. I also really like the pacing of when we find out the different layers to her personality and all the traumatic things that have happened to her and her secrets and what makes her have this super prickly and just guarded personality, which I love characters like that. I don't know why, I just love a grumpy black cat character. There's also a really adorable dog in this book, and the author, they have said that the dog will survive the series. Welcome to the next day in the video. Last night I finished reading Most Ardently by Gabe Cole Novoa. Most Ardently is a trans retelling of the classic Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I had to wear my Pemberley sweatshirt to represent, of course. In this retelling, the Elizabeth character is actually a trans teenage boy named Oliver. And a handful of people know, but to the greater English society, he is closeted as a trans man. One thing to know about this version is that it still has a happy ending, just like the original, and even though the characters are somewhat different, it still gives me all of the Pride and Prejudice giggles that I love. I am pretty much down for any Pride and Prejudice or Jane Austen retelling, so this was great. I actually have had this book for a very long time, like pretty much since it came out, and I just hadn't gotten around to it. And I'm so glad that I finally read it because it was so much fun. One of my favorite things is the juxtaposition between the moments we get between Darcy and Oliver, where Oliver is dressed as his true self, and the moments where Darcy is forced to be in society at like the Meryton Ball, and Oliver is forced to dress like Elizabeth. And it's kind of funny because you can just tell they both hate it there. They both don't want to be there. I also appreciated how the author incorporated the men's versus women's fashion of the time into the story. I liked the direction that the author chose for Charlotte Lucas's character, and he actually split her into two characters, Charlotte, who is still Oliver's best friend, and Charlotte's girlfriend named Lou. They are two of the people that Oliver feels comfortable to be himself around, and they even help him in sneaking out of his house so he can be himself. One thing I need you to know about this version is Mr. Bennet is a true ally, okay? We already know he's a good dad, especially in comparison somewhat to Mrs. Bennet. But when Mr. Bennet finds out, he is so excited for Oliver. And there's never a moment where he questions, this is my son. And just like the original, Mrs. Bennet is overbearing and all about the marriage mark. I feel like this author was able to capture the spirit of everything I love about the original and reshape it into this new book that I love just as much. The only drawback, I would say, to Most Ardently is that we don't get Mr. Callans' iconic exemplary vegetable line. There is not a potato pun in sight. But if that is the one thing that wasn't in it, and the one thing I was like, man, that'd be the only thing I'd change, that doesn't even really matter anyway. I also read A Game in Yellow by Hailey Piper. Her books have appeared on a bunch of lists I've seen recently for trans and non-binary horror authors, so I already had a couple of her books saved to read sometime, but A Game in Yellow was the first one that was available at my library. And I like this one enough that I definitely want to read more from her. A Game in Yellow is a surrealist adult horror that honestly feels like a fever dream in yellow. The thing that piqued my interest about this book is within it there is this play that does very weird things to you if you read it. So if you read all of it, you start going crazy and wanting to kill people and take over the world. All this weird stuff. But if you only read a portion and then stop, it's like the best euphoric feeling in the world. So the main character, Carmen, her girlfriend Blanca, recommends Carmen, hey, we should go read this book. Because Carmen's not really feeling their adult time together. So this is all told from Carmen's point of view, but there's this convoluted layer of she doesn't really understand what's going on in the play, and she's also becoming a character in the play herself, and the lines between reality and fiction are very much blurred. I found the progression of this from reality further into fiction very interesting and just a wild ride. I also found out in the acknowledgement sections that the play is based off of a short story by Ambrose Bierce, which I remember I read one of his short stories in like my American Lit in high school, and then another writer named Robert W. Chambers, who I have not heard before, but I like the idea that this crazy play in this book by Hailey has like a whole other history behind it and kind of mythos that I am intrigued by, but I didn't know anything about it. But Hailey does a good job of explaining enough where I could follow along pretty well. This was also a really short read. I read it in about 2 days. So if you're in the mood for a short, weird girl horror book by a trans author, I would definitely give this one a try. I did want to read a quick quote from the play within the book that just kind of gagged me a bit. So there's two people speaking to each other, our main girl Carmen from the regular world, and Casilda, who is one of these dreamy play actors. Carmen. You two behave as if there's only the masquerade forever. I worry about us. Don't you sense that dreadful atmosphere? Something is amiss outside. And then Casilda responds, outside or in you? I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. And a quick line from Smoke, who is the character that gives Carmen the play initially and is also a trans character. She says, Carmen, it's not real. It just makes you think it is. All sorts of trippy. All sorts of trippy. One random thing I thought of while driving home from work the other day is the song Key to the Castle by Marina really fits this book. I also read a poetry collection that I found on the Trans Rights Readathon Storygraph Challenge, and that is Disintegrate, Dissociate by Arielle Twist. This was also a quick read, but so worth it. I think I read every poem in this book at least 3 times. I got this from my library on Hoopla, so I wasn't able to take screenshots, but I will write out one of the poems that I want to read to you guys. This author is Cree, so First Nations, and she identifies as Two-Spirit and trans femme. Just a quick note on the style of her poetry. It's mostly free verse with some enjambment, and she plays with the spacing too. And it covers the themes of death, nature, bodies, boundaries, broken and reforged, generational connections, and trauma. A lot of misogyny, specifically directed at the intersection of being Indigenous and queer, which sounds like a lot to cover in 80 pages. But there's something about the format of poetry where you can talk about these big ideas with fewer words. So I wanted to read one poem from this collection called Under Uprooted Trees. There are days where I don't remember my name, losing track of who I am now and what I was. A husk of faux masculinity, toxicity, this shell of a man who never existed. Losing control of names chosen and names given, losing track of selves I killed, buried under uprooted trees. This last book took me a little bit longer than I expected to finish reading it, but I did finish it on the very last day of the readathon, and that is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. And before I get into it, I wanted to make a note that in the book, George identifies as queer and gay, and now in 2026, George uses they them pronouns on their Instagram, and in the book, which came out back in 2020, George used he him pronouns. All Boys Aren't Blue is a young adult memoir, and I don't really see many of those. It's written in a collection of essays that flow chronologically and feel like you're in conversation with the author. It's easy to follow, although I would look at content warnings just because it's a memoir and this author is diving deep into their past and their trauma. There are clear learning moments that George shares from their life, and they hope to pass on that knowledge to younger queer and Black people. I found a lot of quotable takeaways from this. I know I'm not the intended audience as an adult, as a white person, but I am queer, and there were a lot of moments where I could relate, but also just listen and learn as well. Now, this is a highly banned book, probably because George talks a lot about their experience with racism and homophobia, and to a certain extent, transphobia, just growing up as the person they are. One of my favorite things about this book is George's perspective that we are on a constant journey of understanding ourselves better. And I'm going to read a quote from them because I think they said it best. Many of us are always in a state of working through something, always in a state of becoming a more aware version of self. And George isn't even that old. They were in their 30s when this was published, and that's still pretty young to write a memoir. This book mostly talks about the time in George's life as a kid and a teen and in college before they really became an activist. So I'm interested to see what comes next for them and just their continued activism. That's all I got for the video. I ended up reading 7 books for this readathon, and I had a lot of fun. Please let me know if you have any recommendations for me based off the books I talked about in this video, if you've read them already, or if you're interested now that you've heard a little bit about them. or just in general, gender, oh my god, or just in general, gender expansive representation. Just with gender is expensive, gender is expensive. Gender expansive representation is what I meant to say. Intersectional trans representation. How many times am I going to say that word today? Most Ardently by Gabe Cole Novoa. Can you hear how loud that person's car is? I don't even know what kind of truck that is.